We have two B-cell receptor inhibitors that are approved, ibrutinib and idelalisib, which is approved in combination with rituximab. And ibrutinib is a BTK inhibitor, idelalisib is a PI3K inhibitor. Both of those enzymes are pathways in the B-cell receptor signaling. There is another enzyme in that pathway called SYK, which is also being targeted, although we don't yet have any commercially available drugs. There are a very large number of next generation BTK inhibitors, SYK inhibitors, and PI3K inhibitors in clinical trials as we speak, many of them. Probably the one closest to being approved potentially is duvelisib, which is a PI3K delta and gamma inhibitor. It is now in a pivotal registration trial versus ofatumumab. And so that one is probably the closest and could potentially be available if it's a positive study in the next 2 years. The question is, are these actually just Me Too drugs, or are they actually better than the first generation drugs in some way? So, there's two ways they could potentially be better. One would be higher efficacy. So we know with the B-cell receptor inhibitors, most of the responses are PRs. So there's obviously room for improvement in terms of CRs, which would also be very nice because if we can get people into complete remission, we have the potential to stop therapy, which we generally don't do right now with these drugs. So people take them for very long periods of time. The other way the next generation drug could potentially be better would be if it had a different toxicity profile. And again, we think of these drugs as generally well tolerated, but they do have their own significant toxicity. So for example, ibrutinib can cause bleeding, which is usually minor, but occasionally more than minor, and atrial fibrillation. Idelalisib can cause pneumonitis, late colitis. So there are side effects where if the next generation drug didn't have them or have them to a lesser extent, that would potentially be very favorable. I think for all of these drugs, there are some hints here and there, but it's still very early in development for most of them.